Thank you. Thank you very much. And everyone, thank you so much for having me. When I'm really sad that Anna couldn't make it, she actually we got connected through a friend named Ben Whalen, who had spoken here either at this campus or a campus up north a couple of years ago. And when they reached out and asked if I wanted to come and speak, I was honored. I mean, it's so cool to be here. I'm probably the least computer savvy human in the room. So, but I can know how to tell a story and take pictures. So thank you all for coming, for sharing your time. Please, at any time, if you guys have any questions about the stories, the trips, the photographs, I'm an open book. I love to share. So if at any time during the presentation, feel free to ask. My name is Todd Glaser. I'm a surf photographer. Like you were saying, I grew up in San Diego. I grew up surfing with my friends. It was a passion of mine from a really young age. We would go to the beach as much as we could. Even at high school, we had surf PE instead of regular PE. So from a young age, it was ingrained where we got to go play in the ocean. In doing so, when I was 15, a friend of mine had a camera. And well, I guess I'll give you a little bit of background. When I was 15, a friend of mine had a camera, and there was 3 of us, and we would all take turns shooting photos of each other. We had one camera between the 3 of us. We had one lens and a water housing. And back then, it was a little bit different because you those things were hard to get. Like even just a water housing, which is the case that you put a camera in, you kind of had to know a guy who knew a guy who had a friend who had a phone number to get the guy. So one friend had it, and we would all just take turns. And for about 4 years, we used this camera, and I ended up falling in love with photography more so than my friends. So I ended up buying it off my friends, and just kind of started getting this rush that every time the waves were good and the light was good, I was able to be out in the water, share time with my friends, go on road trips, go down to Baja, go travel. I was fortunate I got to go to some places with some pretty incredible waves, and when we would come back, we'd all get together and we'd sit around the slides on a light table, and we would hang out and share stories. And so that's really where my passion for photography began. And for the first 5 years, it was like I said, one camera, one lens, one type of film, and if it wasn't sunny, I didn't know how to shoot photos. So I only shot photos when it was sunny. And early in the morning, because that's when the light was good, that's what the guys at the film lab told us. I actually got my first rolls of film developed right down the street at a place called Chrome Digital that's no longer here. My mom worked at Qualcomm just down the street, so she would drop it off on her way to work, and then 2 days later, we'd get the film back, and that's really how I got into photography. So I put together a couple of images. These are kind of a couple of my favorite images that I've shot over the years to kind of give you an idea of some of my work, and then I'm going to go into my most recent project, which is, it was a book and film project that myself and a good friend named Taylor Steele made, named Proximity. So I figured because we're in San Diego, it's our hometown, I figured we should share a couple images from right down the street. So this is Black's Beach, right down by La Jolla Shores. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's down at the glider port. What's funny about this image is, there's 5 people in the frame, and it looks like it's a pretty empty lineup. If you were to take a step further back, there's about 200 people in the water fighting for waves.
And they're naked, right?
And no, that's where the volleyball courts are. That's behind me. So, so I thought you looked familiar. So, part of photography, really, it's going outside. It's being healthy. It's being an active lifestyle. That's something that I love to share, that I love to be a part of. So I got into it far more about going on adventures with friends than I did about being able to do slideshows or being able to make books or getting images in print. I do love print. I do love print media. I'm a big fan of it. Like I said, I'm a little, I guess you call it old school in that sense. I have a lot of books. So anyways, these are a few images that I just started out with. This is probably from one of my first rolls of film when I was 16. This is my friend Ian Harris. This is at Torrey Pines State Beach. So as we get into the slideshow, you'll see images of multiple-time world champions, some artists, I think there's a few musicians in here as well. People who I've had the great fortune to spend time with, be able to share very far off places of the world together, but it all comes down to like me and a couple high school buddies taking turns shooting photos of each other. So this is my friend Ian Harris. This is probably one of the first photos I shot that really, I got the bug. I was hooked. One of the things that's so special about shooting at Torrey Pines, which is right down the street here, is the valley. Anytime in the fall or winter time, when we get these offshore winds, they all get funneled through the valley, so they end up making the waves stand up a little bit longer, and it makes the waves a little bit hollower. For anyone that surfs in the room, you guys can relate. For anyone that doesn't surf, you can also notice that in that valley, there's one of the very few places in San Diego where you actually get orange light. Most of the other beaches, if you look at a place like Black's Beach or even La Jolla Shores, the sun has to go over a mountain to light up the waves. You'll see these long shadows on the beach, but Torrey Pines is very unique in that sense that you get the very, very first rays of light. So, while I am a surfer and a photographer and I've traveled quite a bit, I'm also kind of a poor man's meteorologist. So these are all things that we try and look at and think about when we're making images. And I guess that kind of gets me to the point a little bit that all these images we're going to share, these are all collaborations. I don't think any of these images are, I happen to be at the beach and this person happened to be there. These are images that we've seen a storm, we've seen a swell develop, we've watched the weather, we've discussed what kind of boards they're going to ride, we've discussed what kind of lens or film we're going to use. So these are very much a collaboration between myself and the subject. This image was shot with a wide angle lens, so I'm probably about 2.5 feet away from them. So it takes a lot of trust between the subjects and myself to be able to capture images like this. So they're collaborations, all these images. Some photographers like to just post up at the beach. They'll go to Lower Trestles or they'll go to the US Open and hang out and just have a long lens, and they happen to be there, and whoever comes across is in front of their lens, those are the images they make. That's not the way I like to work. I like to work with the guys, build a story, share a story, and then enjoy the whole process of it. So this is another one. Rob Machado, who's a local San Diego surfer. We grew up together. His nephews that he used to babysit grew up down the street from me, so we'd spend a lot of time together. We've come to be really good friends. This is at Black's Beach again. What's so unique about Black's Beach is the light and how it reflects off the cliffs back onto the water. Not a lot of places have that. And again, this is with a wide angle lens. This day, Rob wasn't really feeling like surfing. He had some family stuff going on, and I called him, and I was like, hey, this is one of those days. It's pretty special. The light's beautiful, and it's one of these real still afternoons. I think it's worth making the trek down. And he trusted me just from past experience, and we were able to make these images together. This is at La Jolla, Wind and Sea Beach, Joel Tudor. And you'll notice a lot of the images I shoot, they tend to be more backlit. It's not so great for advertising, but it tends to kind of personify the feeling of surfing, the emotion of surfing, what it's relatable to surfing. There's so many images in the action sports world that show what color their t-shirts are, what color the board shorts are, what color the shoes are. To me, I think when we're making images, it's more about personifying the feeling than it is about showing the latest and greatest with whatever it is that they're wearing. Of course, when it comes to commercial applications, we do that at times, but as far as this slideshow and the images that we're choosing to share, I'd rather show images that show the beauty and the individualism of how the surfers surf rather than maybe what they're wearing. So this is a Wind and Sea Beach with a 700mm lens.
So you're shooting from the sand?
That was from the sand, yes. This is another image. This is at San Elijo Beach in Cardiff. This is the other beach in San Diego that doesn't have cliffs to block the light. So you'll notice most of the images shown are all really early morning or really late in the afternoon. A big reason for that is a couple of years ago, I kind of had this epiphany. I was traveling probably 8 to 9 months of the year, going all over the world, chasing waves, chasing swells, and I never had time to surf because whenever I was home, I was still trying to shoot and I was still trying to work, and I just didn't get a chance to ride very many waves. So I made a rule for myself about 4 or 5 years ago that was if it doesn't happen in the first hour of light or the last hour of light, it didn't happen. So that gave me a whole lot more time to surf. And so call it selfish, call it whatever you want. I was tired of waiting for people to show up late. The guys know if they get there at 8 in the morning, I'm done. And it also kind of comes back to shooting in the film days. You know, with digital, we have these cameras that we can go out and we can shoot 1,000 photos. And they're not saying that they're meaningless, but everything kind of blends into one. Digital cameras are great tools. They're here to stay, but there was something special about picking and choosing when you would load a roll of film, when you would choose to shoot it. And I think there's a lot of, there's something to be said about kind of slowing your whole process down and defining your moments. I went bow hunting with a friend of mine a couple of years ago, and he was telling me that. We went out all day, and he had six shots, and he got a deer in the second shot, and we were done for the day. So it was 2 shots, and we were out all day. It was pretty cool. A great part, yes?
For that last image, someone riding the nose into the barrel?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, okay. All right.
So I went out the day before, and I was just shooting empty waves really early in the morning, and I called a friend of mine. This is Ryan Birch. And I was like, hey, the light was so pretty this morning. We should try and make a photo tomorrow. And he's like, cool. He's like, let's come down. I'm like, the waves are small. Bring a longboard. And so we shot a lot of photos that are backlit, and you could see him hanging 10. And this one, as I was shooting, he was on the nose, and a lip fell over. So it was kind of a combination of an empty wave looking out the tube shot and a surfer. So it's almost more of a portrait than it is like an action shot. And so I think what's so great about photography is focusing on the subtleties than it is just the peak moments. Another thing too is we get to meet a lot of really interesting people, a lot of great people, a lot of friends. This is Parker Coffin, a really good friend of mine. He was 11 years old at this time. I'd just flown into Hawaii. I was walking down to the beach at Pipeline to check the surf, and he was walking down. He'd just broken his step-up board. His favorite board is a 6'3" at Pipeline. He was like 11 or 12 years old. I've known this kid since he was 8, and when I lived in Santa Barbara, I would take him surfing all the time, and I'd pick him up, he'd be starving, we'd have to go to In-N-Out, 2 double-doubles, 2 fries, 2 milkshakes, and then go surfing, and then we'd do it again after. So his nickname's Pork Chop. Now he's all fit, he like hit puberty, and he's like strong and stuff, but he's always Pork Chop to me. But it's funny, and part of what I love about photography is the history that happens. And at the time, he doesn't think like much. So I was walking down the path, he was walking with his mom, and I'm like, what happened? He's like, wave at Pipeline broke, and it broke my board. He's like, I'm so bummed. I'm like, yeah, but you just surfed Pipeline. I'm like, so hold on, stand there. So from a photo standpoint, I shot 2 frames. I was using a medium format film camera. I got low to kind of give him a sense of power, to give it strength. At the time, it was literally a snapshot. At this point, I probably would have shot it on my phone and not thought twice about it. But moments like this, now that he's on the world tour and he spends a lot more time traveling, it's kind of fun to look back. I think this is one of my favorite photos of him. This is another one of Greg Long, big wave surfer. I've been fortunate to meet a lot of great people, a lot of interesting people. Been a lot of exciting places and a lot of situations that aren't so great. This is just a low tide afternoon. We were doing a portrait actually for a Japanese editorial magazine, and they asked us to shoot a color 2-page spread of him with all his boards. And I thought this was a little bit more interesting, so this is what they got. When it's editorial, you kind of have the freedom to do what you want. When it's a commercial or you're doing an advertising campaign and it's something that's going to end up on a billboard or on the side of a building, you don't have that luxury. But part of being an editorial photographer at times is you get to use your own creative license to do what you think is best. He wasn't happy with me because I made him jump in the water. It was like November and the water was freezing. And I was like, if you can surf 50-foot waves, you can jump in the water for 5 minutes. So this image I shot back in 2010. This is probably one of the first images I've made that was probably the most widely seen image. It's Kelly Slater. It was the image that was made to, I guess, to celebrate his 10th world title campaign. Kelly and I met in 2008 through a mutual friend of ours, a photographer named Steve Sherman, who was traveling with him at the time doing documentary photography. We met. I ended up getting hired by Quicksilver the following year, and since then, Kelly and I have spent a lot of time together. I've documented him from his 10th world title all the way to now. We made a film last year, a documentary film last year. We're working on a new project at the moment, and I've been very fortunate to kind of be side by side for a lot of pivotal moments in his life over the last 10 years or so. So this was the first one. This was the first time we actually shot photos together. One of my favorite images that we've made together, and on this wave he had 4 different poses that all could have been great images. And the funny thing about this, and what we were talking about earlier, was that this was a secret spot wave, and there was probably 5 guys out. And so when we got these images, we're like, okay, he said this was the best session of his life. And we're like, okay, what do we do? We can't tell anyone where it is. We can't tell anyone that it happened. So we made the images black and white. We never told anyone where they were, because people would come up to us like, how's that photo of Kelly at Pipeline? We're like, awesome. And how's that one in Fiji? We're like, oh, that day was so good. What day was that? And so still to this day, we've never revealed where it is, which is kind of fun for us. It's kind of fun for the viewers too, to kind of guess. And even if you can't surf waves like this, just going out and exploring and having your own experience is special. So that's one of the great things about surfing. This is another one. So again, I guess this is just a little bit of background information about myself. In 2011, a good friend of mine, Taylor Steele, and I, we got together and decided to make a film to kind of pay homage to a great bodyboarder named Mike Stewart, who in 1996 chased a swell from Tahiti all the way to Alaska. So fast forward 15 years, and the idea came up where we should make a film together. Part of what I've been able to do as a photographer is I've been able to branch out and make films and work with amazing directors. I've been able to work in the virtual reality world a little bit. I've actually worked with Google a little bit on some VR cameras. So it's really neat for me to be able to share these experiences, but also be able to use all the different tools that are available to us now. I mean, even when it comes to tracking a swell of this magnitude, this was the biggest south swell still to this point that's happened since 2011. We use online websites, we use storm tracking, we use weather forecasts to be able to look and see, is this the storm that's really going to be the one that's going to make us want to drop everything in our personal lives, get on a plane at night, and come home a week or 2 later. This was one of those ones. We'd planned out a movie, and 2 weeks later, the swell of all swells came. So this was the very first day. We dropped everything, we flew to Tahiti, and this was called the Code Red Swell at Chopu. We couldn't get on a boat, so my friend and I paddled out from the beach, and I was swimming in the water with a 70 to 200 millimeter lens, swam for about 10 hours from the beach, and then swam in. That night, we came in, we went online, and actually Googled airplane tickets, and booked a ticket to Mexico the next day. So we timed it that by the time that the swell hit Tahiti, we had 36 hours to get to Mexico. So we flew from Tahiti to Mexico, surfed the swell in Mexico for a day and a half. From Mexico, we were meant to fly to San Francisco, missed our flight because of a rainstorm, had to divert to Los Angeles, ended up surfing the same swell in Los Angeles before taking the red eye that night to Alaska and getting on a boat outside of Homer. So in 7 days, we did about 17,000 miles of traveling and made a film about it. This was day one when we were all bright-eyed and actually awake. By the end, we were delirious. I remember calling my mom, I think from Seattle, and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I don't know where I am." But this was Nathan Fletcher at Chopu, probably one of his most iconic waves. So for those of you guys into surfing, it's, fans of surfing. I'm a big fan of surfing. I surf every day. Actually, I surfed yesterday. I didn't surf this morning, but I love it, and I love to share it. And it's funny because a lot of the photographers whom I look up to are all the rock and roll photographers. I love surf photography, but so much of surf photography is being there. I think rock and roll photographers are the ones that really, not so much shooting the concerts, but the ones behind the scenes. The Danny Clinchins, the Anton Corbins, those guys are my huge inspirations to go out and do what we do. This is from a trip that I just finished school, and I was living in Santa Barbara for 3 years. I got it, like I was saying, I got a degree in commercial advertising, and the whole time I was interning with fashion photographers and commercial photographers. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, and the first thing I did after school was I went on a surf trip with a couple buddies because I just figured I'd done a 4-year program in 3 years. I need to go on a surf trip, and I was just shooting photos of my friends on the side. This is one of the trips that I did with a friend of mine. This is Greg Long. We came back. I called the guys at Surfer and was like, "Hey, we just went camping, and this is a wave that hasn't really been seen very much. It could be kind of cool if you guys are interested." The next month, it was on the cover of Surfer magazine and ended up being the 2009 photo of the year. So this was my first submission to Surfer magazine, and then from then I got hired, and everything kind of snowballed a little bit quickly after that. But it really all stemmed from going surfing with friends and just having a camera. So fast forward, I guess, a couple of years, and this is the very first day, the very first waves ever ridden at Kelly's wave pool. Kelly and I, like I said, we met in 2008, and about a year or two later, we were traveling probably 6 to 8 months of the year together, for probably the last 10 years or so. My wife always jokes that he's kind of like my second wife. So we've become close, and he's really trusted me to document, the end of his career with Quicksilver, the start of his new companies. We made the first photographs of this lake. It was originally called the Fish Pond before it was even called the Surf Ranch, because everything was private and secret, and everyone was in NDAs, so we'd known about this for a long time. We were actually on a surf trip in Fiji when he got a text and was like, there's waves breaking, and he showed me the video, and we changed our tickets and flew home that night, drove all night, got to the location that was, we had no idea where we were. Woke up the next morning, and this was the session that was the first time the wave pool had ever been seen. I remember shooting it for the first time going, all right, here we go. And I was just coming off a 10-day trip where we'd been shooting all day, and I hadn't slept very much. And John Moore, who was the creative director of the project, comes up to me and he's like, you nervous? And I'm like, well, why am I nervous? I'm like, well, why should I be? He's like, you're the only photographer here. And I'm like, oh no. There was a 16-man film crew. They had 6 red cameras and water units and all this stuff. And I looked around, I'm like, I'm the only still person. And every person that went there had to put their cell phone into a basket so no one could take iPhone photos. So when he said that, I was like, well, if I wasn't nervous enough, now I am. So, I guess that's a little bit of background about myself and some of the work that I've done. But this is, I guess, one of the images now that I'm really proud of, because now there's going to be more and more wave pools being built, especially all over the world. When it talks to Japan and all these, Florida and all these different places. But I've been fortunate to be able to be there for a couple of firsts, and so from a documentary standpoint, that's always kind of neat. And I think you guys can all attest to that with what you guys do. Making something first or being there for something first is a special time.
So Kelly didn't know this was being built? This was new to him too?
Kelly knew it was being built, but he didn't know when it was going to be ready. And so when he got the text that waves were breaking, we dropped everything and got on a plane and went there. So a lot of our lives for the last 10 years has been what's happening right now. We're leaving today, we're leaving tomorrow, and you get on a plane, and sometimes it leads to amazing experiences like this, and other times it leads to going and chasing swells. But I guess what I'm sharing here is predominantly my still photography. Most recently, I've been getting more into motion photography, water cinematography, a little bit of TV broadcast stuff, which is fun, but I think my heart and soul is always just in capturing images and telling stories, which is the fun part for me. So this leads me into my most recent project. Oh, and again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. Technical questions, story questions, what it's like to not sleep for a long time, whatever you guys want to know. I'm an open book. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's been a little talk about the future of competitive surfing now that you have this wave that's reproducible, which is not the case in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Was that part of the original intent, or was it just to create waves all day?
Todd, can you repeat the question?
Yes. The question was, that's a really good question, by the way. Thank you. The question was, with the creation of the wave pools and man-made waves, could that be played into the future competitive surfing? Is that kind of I think it's slowly becoming integrated into the professional surf world. This year was the first time that a wave pool was introduced into the World Tour. They just had the very first World Tour event up in Lemoore last month and, at the Surf Ranch. I think a big part, as far as the business side of surfing, is how do you, as far as broadcast on TV or as far as getting fan base, how do you go to a potential sponsor, a potential advertiser, potential TV network and say, we have 32 of the greatest male surfers and 18 of the greatest female surfers, and they're going to be in France for the next 14 days. And we need 3 days to run that, but we don't know when those 3 days are going to be, and they might potentially be a couple half days, and they might potentially be that. So as far as trying to market that or sell that or brand that or even just televise that, it's never been possible because TV stations are like, look, the Super Bowl, we know when it's happening and we can plan a whole year around this. But as far as competitive surfing, it's different because now surfers are going to have the ability to create runs. They're going to have the ability to have a practice. It's almost like the driving range of surfing. It's almost like snowboarders where they're able to practice their run over and over and over again. I still think there's a lot to be worked out, but it's kind of the first time in surfing where everyone's had equal opportunity. Now, to play devil's advocate, people are going to argue that a big part of surfing is being able to read the ocean, being able to understand the conditions, choose the right equipment for those conditions, and be able to adapt well to that. That eliminates a lot of that. I still think that the best surfers are gonna excel in those situations because they're gonna take what they have and be able to grow with it rather than just be subjected to being able to do the waves over and over and over again. Do I think it'll ever replace ocean surfing? No, I think it's just gonna enhance it and get more people excited about surfing and introduce it. Does that answer your question a little bit? Okay, cool. Thank you for asking the question. So this image is the first image I'm gonna lead into, I guess on my most recent project. It's called Proximity. And it's a film and book project that I mentioned him earlier, Taylor Steele, who's a film director. We've made a couple films together in the past, and this is the one where about 3 years ago, I was out surfing in Cardiff, and he was living in Australia. I hadn't seen him in a while, and he's like, hey, we should do something together. It's been a little while. And I was like, yeah, that'd be fun. I've always wanted to make a coffee table book, and he's like, I really want to make another surf film. Let's do something together. So we were surfing, we went in, we had coffee, we wrote down some notes, and within a couple hours, we had this idea of what would it be like to get 4 groups, 4 pairs, so 2 surfers, a total of 8 surfers, together individually, and take them to a place they'd never been before, mic them, and then take a step back and see what it would be like to be a fan of surfing, to be a fly on the wall, and how they would interact. So what we did is we based it off the seasons, spring, summer, fall, winter. Each season had a pair of surfers, kind of an older, I'd say a more experienced surfer and maybe a less experienced surfer. So we did partnerships with like Kelly Slater, who's an 11-time world champion, and John Florence, who at the time hadn't won a world title. By the time the project came out, he'd won 1 world title. He's currently won 2. This is the first trip. This is actually the last trip we did, but this is a trip we did with Dave Rostovich, who's a free surfer, but who's also very competitive, with Steph Gilmore, who's a 6-time world champion, potentially winning 7 this year. Both super competitive, both phenomenal surfers, both considered to be dancing on water in a lot of ways. So we were like, what would it be like to take them camping in Baja for a week? What would they talk about? How would they surf with each other? What would it be like? And so in each part of these projects, we try to think of different things, give them different scenarios for them to hang out, feel relaxed, and just enjoy time away from competition, away from all the stresses of being home, and be able to experience somewhere new for the first time. So this is the summer section. This is Dave Rostovich and Stephanie Gilmore. And I'm just gonna start here. So on each trip, we had different conversations and just kind of different scenarios for them to hang out. For them, we thought, what would they talk about on a dusty road? So we went to the middle of Baja and mic'd them, and they went driving for a couple hours, and we just recorded it. So in the book, we used their audio as a narration to tell stories and give insight into what it is that they were doing, what they were talking about. And in the film, that carried through in the process. So these are just a couple of shots of them hanging out. We just went looking for waves, just had fun, went camping, unplugged, kind of just got away from everything. As everyone knows in the room, life gets busy. Even being a professional surfer gets busy. They're traveling all over the world doing promos, surfing competitions, making films, making books. It's a lot of fun, but it's also a lot of stress on a home life if you have a personal life and are trying to raise kids or spend time with other people. So these are just a few images. Anytime I had the opportunity to get the 2 of them together in a frame, that was really special for us. With the title being Proximity, anytime the 2 of them were together, that's important. None of these are really set up. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to give them the opportunity to hang out and then just take a step back so they didn't feel like there's a camera always in their face. My job on this project was to organize the surfers, pick the locations, pick the swell, and help with basically all the details, all the production. Taylor organized a film crew, so on all these trips we would have 3 to 4 film cameras, and I was the only still photographer. We partnered on the project. So from my standpoint, if you were to see like a behind the scenes photo, I'd have like a wetsuit halfway on, a camera in a water housing, and like a 500 millimeter lens over my shoulder, and just running around in circles trying to capture as many moments as you can in a short amount of time, because when you work with a team, you're able to just focus on what it is that you're doing. But with my background in the water, I could only do so much. I really had to try and map out how I was going to tell the story the best that I could with a limited amount of time. Most of these trips were about 7 days long. This trip, we had the great fortune of being there for 10 days. The trip with John and Kelly, we were there for 3 days, just to kind of put it into perspective. It took overall from first cup of coffee to first premiere was 2 years. And we're still kind of touring it a little bit, but it's a project I'm really proud of. So this was a swell. And what's interesting about this is both Dave and Steph live an hour apart from each other in Australia, and they'd never surfed together. They'd never been on a surf trip together. And when we organized the trip, we called them in Australia and we're like, hey guys, there's this big swell coming to Mexico. Can you guys fly 14 hours to drive 14 hours? So there's kind of a bit of stress as far as organizing these trips. And but I think it all worked out. I think she was a standout of the swell. She surfed better than anyone in the water. And it was so cool. And it's not a male-female thing, it's a surfer thing. Anyone that surfs can look at the beauty in that surfing and go, wow, that's something that I would hope to aspire to. And the fact that she was doing 6 or 7 of the turns of that on a wave was pretty neat. Each guy has their own unique style. Each surfer has their own unique style. When I say guy, I'm referring to men and female. Dave has this really cruisy, competitive style, but he grew up as a competitive swimmer, and actually the guy who he swam with ended up going on to win a gold medal in the Olympics. So he's super competitive. He was almost so competitive that he had to take away, that he had to totally remove himself from it. Steph, on the other hand, is so competitive, but as soon as she takes the jersey off, she can totally let it go. So that was a really interesting topic conversation between the two of them. Dave couldn't let it go.
Like, talking about surfers and how competitive they are. Like, I know Kelly Slater is super competitive, super focused, and I'm like, how are the other professional surfers? Like, is this their day job and they're totally dedicated to this during the day? Do they live and breathe this? Are they serious about it? Do they just go out and surf and have fun? Like,
I think it depends. Yes, the question was, are the competitive surfers always competitive, and do they have fun surfing? I think every person that you see photos of in this slideshow will say that they have the best job in the world. They grew up surfing with their friends. They love surfing. They love to travel. They love to experience new places. And they've all been very, very fortunate to be able to do what they do. Some of them do it as a bit of an escape. Some of them do it as a, they have something within them that really drives them. A lot of the guys featured in this are all multi-talented. So instead of just focusing on surfing, they'll go golf, they'll pick up a guitar, they'll paint, they'll do photography, they'll do art, so they're not so singularly focused. And I found with competitive athletes, the ones who are able to totally detach and pick up a new trait come back to their sport better than just being so focused. Yes?
One thing that I heard is, I'm Brazilian, and I know like the way that like Brazilians take us surfing is completely different from like Americans and Hawaiians and Australians. So does it like has changed the tour the way the format is right now? I feel like back in the days, like it was like way more laid back, like maybe more like kind of like like not as professional, and now like it just looks like extremely competitive. Sometimes it's just like, oh, I don't want to watch you do this anymore.
Yeah. The question was, has the tour become more competitive? Absolutely. I actually don't follow the tour very much. I'm more the guy that when the tour is over, I get the phone calls to go do book projects and make films. I choose not to go to a lot of the events. It's not that fun for me. It's a lot of time away, and usually the waves aren't that good. I think with the WSL coming in and taking over for the ASP World Tour, they're actually treating it like a profession. They're treating it like a job. The surfers now have health insurance. They have retirement plans. They have the ability to set themselves up financially to, when they're done with their career, maybe not have to work as much. I think a lot of the Brazilians, I think there's no doubt in my mind the Brazilians are the most passionate surfers in the world. And a lot of them, they have it as a way to get out. They not necessarily get out of Brazil because it's a bad place, but it's a way for them to see the world, and they're competitive, and they treat it like a sport. And the country of Brazil supports surfing like a sport. In America, there's so many other things they can do. In America, surfing is more of a hobby. And some people turn into professionals. In Brazil, if you're a surf star, if you're Gabriel Medina, if you're Felipe Toledo, you're right there with Neymar as a soccer player. You're respected as a sport. Surfing in America, it's a little bit different. We're still NASCAR, football, baseball, more traditional sports. And that's my perception of it. But I love the passion that Brazil has, and it's interesting because a lot of people are like, they're super loud and they're rowdy, but like they need that. Like surfing needs that. Surfing needs excitement, because if it's just all hippie stuff, the other thing too is with it becoming more of a sport, they're kind of cracking down a little bit more on the lifestyle that made some of the eccentrics eccentric, if you guys know what I mean.
Some substantive things.
Yeah, it's different, I think when Martin Potter was on tour, it was a lot different. And when Andy was on tour, it was a lot different. Now they've kind of controlled that a little bit more. To each their own. It's made it more of a sport. Just a couple frames. This was a shot I'd seen the day before. I just love the shapes and the texture. It's a little bit of dapple light on Dave. I'll probably scoot forward a little bit, just not take up too much time. This is what it's like to be on set with us. This is our director, Taylor Steele, holding a beer, trying to explain to two of some of the most stylish surfers how to surf together. So with this project, we tried to think of different ways to enhance the experience. One of the things we did is we partnered each one of the surfers with a different artist. So when we premiered the project, we rented out a gallery in New York, and we had all the boards from the project on display. We had photos from the book on display. We had a full virtual reality room set up. So anywhere you went, we had a team that would film virtual reality. And we thought of different ways that we could enhance the viewer experience, and we thought, well, everyone says surfing's a dance. Let's get these two to dance on a wave together. So this is our director trying to explain to them how to dance together with beer in hand. It's really, the photos are all shiny and polished, but really we're having fun. We're going camping, we're going surfing. We're trying not to take ourselves too seriously. So this is the result of that. They went and did it they went and turned 7 times on this wave. This is the second time they did it. The first time was better for the film, and they came in, and me being the photographer, I'm like, hey guys, that was amazing, but I just didn't get the photo. Can you guys wait for it to get a little bit darker? And we'll try it again. I really want to shoot it like 1/10 of a second. I want to make it slow everything down and kind of give it that panning feel. There's an old ballet photo that I saw that made me think of motion and dance, and so this was my version of that.
So are you in the water right now?
I was on the land for this one. Yeah.
You have a tripod so that you can...
I have a tripod and a big telephoto lens, and at this point break, it's a really long point break, and you don't get a lot of opportunities. So a lot of the times with the waves that surf really well, they don't necessarily photograph really well. So a lot of times you're trying to pick and choose what's going to photograph better than what's going to surf really well. So if you go catch a 2-minute wave, it's terrible for photography, but if you can catch a 5-second wave 50 times, you have a lot more opportunity to make moments. This is moving into the fall. How are we doing on time, buddy?
About 10 minutes. We've got some online questions too.
Okay, I'll speed up really quick. This is the fall. Sorry, I can talk a lot, and we used the coffee machine before, so sorry. All right, so this is the fall section. I'll just fast forward it. We went with Shane Dorian, who's a big wave surfer for a long time. Albie Lair, who's a big wave surfer as well, who's about 20 years younger. The whole idea behind getting these two guys together was longevity. There's one thing to go out and catch a 50-foot wave once or twice. It's another thing to do it for 30 years. Shane Dorian's done that for 30 years. He's proven that time, safety, he's invented an inflation system. So if you're underwater, you pull a cord and you have 2 CO2 cartridges that inflate, so you float to the surface. Unfortunately, he had a situation that made him do that, and it made him think about his 2 kids, which is a terrible situation that happened up in Half Moon Bay, but he was okay. Ever since then, he had a 2-wave hold down, came up, could barely breathe, and Since then, he's saved a lot of lives with his invention. So when I say these images are a part of us, it's a part of our creation, it's also part of what we're doing is we're sharing these stories to inform about safety. Because at the end of the day, we're traveling, we're exploring, but we want everyone to be able to come home safely to their families and have a good story to share and make you want to go travel. This is a wave that we found up in Northern Europe. None of us had been there before, and we forecasted this trip. A friend of mine had been there, and he wrote me directions on a napkin. And he called me about a week later. He's like, I think it's going to be good there. So I called, and it's one thing to call on a surf trip. It's another thing to call these guys from their home and their personal lives, and then get a 14-man film crew to go as well. So there's kind of a bit of pressure when you're making those calls. We got skunked for the first 3 days. We ended up going to a bar, and we called Kelly. We're like, Kelly, here we are. Like, we don't know what to do. And he's like, I've never been there, but like, if you can make it to Portugal tomorrow, it's going to be good. We're like, no, we can't. We can't move that. We flew to Europe and had to drive 10 hours. And we ended up the next day, we drove around and ended up finding this wave, and we surfed it for 2 days totally by ourselves. So this is Shane and Albie pushing each other in these conditions. When it comes to shooting, you don't know how long these sessions are going to last. So with a wide angle, I went out. The water's probably about 45 degrees. I shot 3 waves from the water. This is 1, that was 2, and I figured, I think we got it, and then went in and kept shooting from land. So with time and experience comes knowing when you have it, knowing when you don't. You know, a classic pub shot. So for these guys, we had their conversation in a pub. Sorry guys, I'm going to speed up a little bit because there's a section I really want to get to. Rob Machado and Craig Anderson, we took them down to Left Points. 2 super stylish surfers. For anyone into photography, the whole time while we're producing and trying to make all these projects happen, we had a ton of camera gear. I always kept a Leica 35mm camera around my neck. I was trying to scramble to get all my camera gear. I looked up and Rob and Craig were checking it. I picked it up, I shot 1 photo on my Leica. It's a black and white film photo. And this is a wave that we found 4 days of driving 12 hours a day without surfing. We hadn't surfed up until this point. And then we finally jumped a fence, and this is what we found. Couple portraits of Craig, giving a sense of setting. You know, once you have the land shot, once you have the water shot, you know, the portrait shots, you try and give it kind of an intimate look at what it's like to take off down the line. So these are all images that were all shot in 1 day. So when we're shooting, you know, I'm constantly running a mental checklist of like, how can we tell this whole story in a short amount of time? Because we don't know how long this is going to last. We've been totally skunked for days. This turned into our winter section, and we realized, you know what? It doesn't quite feel like winter, so we need to do 1 more trip, which is a hard one to explain to everyone to get done. So we ended up chasing a blizzard to the most northern islands in Japan. And I thought it was a great idea. I was sitting in Hawaii at the time. It was like 5 days before Christmas, and we're like, we have 5 days before Christmas. I think we can do this trip in 3 days. Fly to Japan. We drove in a blizzard for 2 days, surfed for about 40 minutes. Got totally skunked, ended up changing our tickets to leave 1 day early. Had we not changed, 1 guy stayed back and got stuck in the airport for 7 days. So this is us in winter. This is probably one of like 8 waves surfed on the whole trip, and we drove forever. And we're talking like organizing guys from Australia, getting guys from California, just to go to, you know, they believed in our project. So when we say like, you know, this is our project, like everyone worked. It's a quintessential film crew shot. We have a ton of gear when we travel. With the film crew, when we made the film, we had a great team, but we also have a lot of gear. So this is Davis, one of the filmers, passed out on all the Pelican cases. This is the last section. This is Kelly Slater and John Florence, arguably 2 of the greatest surfers of all time. I know we're super short on time. We're thinking of different ways. What would be interesting to get them to converse, to have them have a conversation. They'd never done a surf trip together. I was like, why not get the 2 most competitive surfers ever to play a game of chess? One of the most competitive sports. We tried to take them fishing, we didn't catch anything. Chess, on the other hand, and for those of you that play chess, you could probably see what's happening. This image was 100% inspired by an image that Walter Eos shot in 1964 in the clubhouse of 2 golfers, Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus. It's a black and white image. If you guys have ever seen it, it's a direct derivative of this. So this is homage to Walter Eos, one of the greatest photographers of all time. I actually called him and told him that. He was like, well, mine was black and white. And I was like, I don't know, it's color. You know, it's not all about waves. It's about exploring, looking out the windows. We've built this great relationship, and I've been able to kind of share these stories, you know, have intimate access to this. That's Kelly looking out. We arrived, we were meant to go to a place for a week. We ended up being there for 3 days. This is straight off the plane. Kelly and John looking at an empty lineup. So a big part of what we wanted to do is photograph these guys where no one else is, so when this project came out, no one knew that it existed. So just getting these two guys together was a task, and making sure there weren't other cameras around was a big task too. Kelly was really instrumental in helping forecast this swell. So, you know, this was in 2016, to get two of the greatest surfers in the world surfing by themselves for 3 days with 0 cameras is kind of a tricky thing to do. This is them doing their thing. Again, anytime I had the chance to get two of them together, I would. Underwater is probably my favorite way to shoot images. I apologize if I'm rushing. I know we're short on time. These next 2 images are probably my favorite images from the project. This one of Kelly is underwater. It was shot with a really wide-angle lens, but it was shot with a rectilinear lens rather than a fisheye. Most fisheye lenses are real bulbous, like a GoPro or even like a Canon fisheye. I did an automotive shoot where we were tracking on the side of a bridge. And I remember after the shoot, I called Kelly. I was like, I just did this automotive shoot, and there's this lens. It's amazing, and we built a water housing in a port just for this lens. And we waited 2 years for the waves to get good, for us to go to this location with this place in mind. And when we got this image, we're like, okay, it was worth it. This is one of the few photos that hangs up on his wall at his house. It was also the cover of Surfer magazine. This image shows the art. So like I said earlier, each surfer was partnered with a different artist. This is the art by Richard Phillips out of New York. So we wanted this to be an you know, multi-layered experience, not just surfing, not just waves, not just music. So with the project, we had an original score, original crew, original artwork, and all the boards are at my house. So when we do these art shows, you can go touch the boards, feel the boards, see them firsthand. All right, this is the last image, and probably one of the images we're most proud of, we're most grateful for. Kelly had that wave before, not the above water one, the below water one. And earlier in the day, he was like, I was in the water and I ducked over and I watched John pass by me. He's like, is that what you're trying to photograph? And I said, yeah. I'm like, it looks so cool, the water's so clear. And he's like, cool. And then he was paddling back out after that previous wave, and John was already in the tube, and he's like, I'm gonna duck dive in front of you. And I'm like, no, John's got a good one. We hadn't got a good photo yet. And you know, sometimes these swells only last half a day. So Kelly duck dives in front of me, and I'm thinking, oh man, he blocked it. I don't know what to think. And he comes up and he's like, that was the one. And so I'm just thinking, oh man, this guy's so competitive, he blocked him. He totally blocked the shot because he knew he got the shot. I went back to the boat. I sat in the corner of the boat. I undid the housing, and you always start back to front. You never start at the front. The front's never good with photo shoots. And this was the last wave before we went back to the boat. And I was like, oh, I'm like, block, block, block. Oh, we have something here. And he walked by. John walked by, and he's like, what's that? And I'm like, I think we have something kind of special here if this thing's in focus. And then Kelly walked by, and he's like, that's the one, I told you. It ended up being the cover of the book and the cover of the project. And to me, this really summed up proximity. Again, at the time, John had not won a world title. Kelly had won 11. I hate to say old guard, but the older generation watching the newer generation, so there's a lot of symbolism with that. Thank you guys. I apologize I rushed. I know there's questions. I hate to rush. I do still shoot on film. Not all the time, but for this project, I probably went through I probably shot half it on film. Yeah. Most of the color images are all digital, and most of the black and white images are all on film. I've really just tried to kind of simplify my whole my process by bringing less gear. It's a lot to travel with, especially when you're the Sherpa carrying all the stuff. My back appreciates not carrying as much film stuff, but yeah, I'm trying to build a darkroom right now. I love shooting it. I miss the tangibility of it. I miss being able to smell it, even though it smells terrible, but it's the process, and everything moves super fast. I like to slow it down a little bit. But yeah, I still do shoot quite a bit of film. Thank you guys again for coming and listening. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was an honor to be here, so thank you guys.